Hey, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to the Bimmer Barn. Today we're going to be looking at my 550i and trying to diagnose some of the common N62 problems that I think that this car is suffering from. Everything from the coolant leak that we know we have for sure. It could be burning, it could be leaking. The oil as well. Just a ton of different stuff on the list. We'll probably check that airbag system as well. But I hope you guys enjoy this series, and I'm thinking that this car is going to give us a run for our money. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Now our main concern today is the coolant leak, but before we get the car warmed up, because I want to just test it by letting the car warm up and seeing where water comes out, let's go ahead and get it on the lift first, and while everything's cool, we can poke around underneath the car and see what other things might need addressing. All right, so taking our first look under this car, and a little bit more oil than I wanted to see, but I can't say that this is any more oil than I was expecting to see. I say that because, like I said, I have one of these 545s, similar motor, similar car in the past, and they're just known for a couple of different leaks. Over on this side, you have the alternator bracket. You can kind of see the alternator up there if I shine the light correctly, and those have a gasket beneath them, which is a pain to change, and when they start leaking, you know, you obviously have to change it, otherwise you get oil buildup. I'm not saying that this is what the problem is, because I do want to investigate further, but we've definitely got oil leaking from the driver's side as well as the passenger side. You can see it's just covered on that AC compressor there, on the sway bar brackets, just all over. So looking a little bit further back though, you got the oil pan, you got your oil filter. Now, I see a little bit of oil on the bell housing where it meets with the engine here, but I'm thinking that this could be from the oil filter, because the little screws in the middle there, they tend to strip out and maybe leak a little bit of oil, or it could just be residual coming from the front of the car where it's blowing back while driving and accumulating right there. I don't see any drips, it just looks a little bit wet, so that's pretty reassuring. And also it looks like the oil pan is good, and from what I can see down here with the valve covers, it looks like the valve covers are dry too. Right there you can kind of see the valve covers, oxygen sensor for the headers and such. But yeah, looks pretty dry up there. Usually you'd see some oil on the cylinder head if the valve covers were leaking, but those are kind of easy to change. Obviously the alternator gasket, that's a little bit more difficult. Now if we move a little bit back further, something that I think I noticed, look at this guys, that's why the car sounds so good. It's got a MagnaFlow center muffler. It looks like it was welded in right here and right over there. So I'm not sure what those mufflers are. Maybe someone can tell me if those look original or maybe they're also MagnaFlow. But then yeah, it goes all the way to the back, straight pipe to the quad tip for the M5 style diffuser. So MagnaFlow muffler, pretty cool. That is maybe why the car sounds so good. In my opinion, I think a lot of you guys would agree. But let's go ahead and look at the back end and see if there's anything over there. All right, back here, really no surprises. You see these big cylinders right here? That's part of the active drive sway bars. So the sway bars have basically infinite adjustment as to how stiff they are, and the car is able to change those settings, I think, on the fly, depending on what driving mode you were in and stuff like that, or how the car's handling. But otherwise, I don't see any leak coming from the differential. It looks really dry, and the bushings as well don't appear to be torn, or I don't hear any clunk coming from the transmission or from the differential, so that's really good. And it looks like factory struts combined with, I think, factory springs as well, so all that is pretty reassuring. Axles look good, most of the bushings look good. I don't see anything wrong back here, but let's go ahead and move back towards the front of the car. So what I think we need to do to figure out the source of those oil leaks is, let's go ahead and see if we can remove the air intake, the engine cover here, and shine our flashlight in the engine bay and see if we can get a better idea of where the car might be leaking some oil. All right, I'm getting serious flashbacks looking at this motor of all the service I did on my old N62. Looks like a lot of stuff we're gonna have to repeat. You can see some oil buildup on the front timing cover there. Kind of just leaks down a little bit. Right here we have the vacuum pump. I've got my light on it, and right below it we've got the starts of the oil leak, at least from this side. So we might just have a simple vacuum pump gasket leak causing the oil to drip over on this side. Over here, a couple things that worry me. Obviously, like I said, the alternator bracket, it's down there, but look at this valve cover. The valve cover itself has oil on top of it. So I was wondering, well, how would it get there? And looking up here, you see that the PCV hose also has oil on top of it. And then if I go ahead and just peel back this, it looks like someone tried to service the valve covers, probably did the gaskets, but didn't replace the PCV system, and they broke the hose, probably tried to glue it or something. But look at all that oil that's coming out from there. So I wonder if that could be just over time causing the oil leak over down on this side. I think we'll probably end up having to service things one at a time on this motor just to determine the severity of all the leaks. Now, as far as oil goes, that's not a big concern. Oil leak, it's not going to keep the car from running or anything like that, but something that does concern me is coolant leaks, and this motor is known for a lot of different coolant leaks. So let me show you. We already talked about the valley pan, which is underneath the intake manifold, and it has a water pipe, and actually that water pipe goes into this thermostat housing. So you can see the smaller one right there, the bigger one goes right behind this sensor. But there's also this coolant line. I can try to show you. One of them goes right there into the cylinder head. There's also a T, and it comes from this hose right here. So this hose, basically like an overflow hose, goes in into a T, and that T, I believe it's made out of plastic on the OEM part, and a lot of people, when they do the upgrade, they just use a brass fitting and replace it, and that would resolve any leak that could be coming from there. So that's a common item that you really should replace if you're going to take the intake manifold off. But something that really concerns me is, look at this upper radiator hose. Kind of hard to see, but if you just see what kind of color that is, that's brown. That is a brown radiator hose right there. And this does concern me because brown is a sign of the plastic getting old, aged, and basically getting ready to crack. So that might be a potential cause of the leak, but at a minimum, it would need to be replaced when we service everything else on the motor here. Now, what I'd always recommend is checking fluids when you buy a car. So checking the power steering, looks like it might be empty in there. Probably needs to be serviced or at least filled up. Might have a leak, might not, need to figure that out. The cooling system, like I said, that's our big concern today. We're trying to figure out where this leak is coming from. And I already put water in it. Looks like it's already burnt or evaporated some coolant there. So we might put a little bit more in before we start up the car. This cap here definitely looks old. Actually, yeah, look at how broken this cap is right here. You can see it's missing that forward O-ring. So this cap is done for. We're gonna have to add that to the list of things we need to service. That could definitely be causing a leak. You see all that coolant there. It could be just coming out as steam and getting around the seal. So we'll put that back on, and I think that we're done up here. Not a lot else to check out. The brake fluid reservoir is under there where the booster is. I'm sure that it's got brown brake fluid. All the cars I ever buy do, and this car has been sitting for 2 years. But I think what we should do now is start the car up and let it idle for a minute, maybe get it up to temp, and then see if we have any water coming out the bottom. And if not, we'll have to determine where it could be burning inside the motor. I'll tell you what though, it definitely starts up every time now without going into any sort of drivetrain malfunction mode, and no check engine light, which is really good. So it's a good thing that we replaced that crankshaft position sensor. But yeah, let's go ahead and let this car warm up just a little bit and start inspecting that motor. And something else that I noticed just from watching the videos after editing them, it looks like we have a bad brake light switch because the brake lights are 100% stuck on. I don't think there's anything I can do to turn them off. When you do hit the brake light, this one would illuminate, I believe. I don't know actually. Let's see what the lights are doing right now. Well, yeah, the lights are off, so that does mean that we probably have a bad brake light switch, or worst case scenario is that sometimes you get a little bit of corrosion on the back plates of the taillights here, and then they short out and they'll provide power to the bulbs when no power is supposed to be given. But it is symmetrical on both sides. So what I'm thinking right now, possible brake light switch, probably gonna look into that as well. Yeah, look at just how brown that upper hose is right there. Unacceptable. I wonder if that could be causing our leak, or sometimes the water pump will leak from the bearing. The water pump is really easy because it's that big pulley right there, right underneath the thermostat. Everything's kind of integrated, you know, on the N62. I do smell some coolant though, so hopefully we'll be able to figure out where it's coming from. Something started squeaking. I hope you guys can hear that. I think it's coming from underneath the car. Possibly, I'm thinking either the AC compressor or the power steering. Let's try putting some power steering fluid in there and see if it makes that thing quieter. All right, I'm actually thinking it's probably a tensioner or a pulley or something over here. Sounds like something's running dry, like a bearing's running dry. I would think it's gonna be something belt related. But I think I found our coolant leak, so let me turn the car off since this noise is really annoying, and I'll show you where the coolant leak is coming from. Oh my gosh, that was literally so annoying. So here is where I think the majority of the coolant leak is coming from. You can see the bottom side of this hose right here, the upper radiator hose. Look at that water coming from that junction right there. It seems pretty obvious from this angle, but I could definitely imagine missing that if you didn't have the correct mirror, or if you didn't know that, you know, this hose right here was old. So it's very wet there. You can see that green old coolant coming out. I definitely think that is a cause of our leak. Now we also know that we have some sort of belt or pulley issue. Possible power steering leak. We need to replace the upper cap there, and also the front timing guide covers, those are leaking. Probably need to get a gasket for the vacuum pump there, and man, I really don't want to do the alternator bracket, but it looks like we might have to. So if you guys out there have those N62 motors, you might be benefiting from this build, because we're going to be doing probably a few DIYs here, hopefully enlighten you guys on how this motor works and how easy / difficult it can be to service it. I also noticed that down here it looks like we have some fresh oil. That's just a couple drops that occurred while we were running the motor. Came from, I guess, kind of this area here. So I'm wondering, I'm hoping that it could be the vacuum pump, because that's a pretty easy seal to replace, but it could also be a combination leak with those timing covers on the front of the motor as well. Like I said, the valve covers look like they've been replaced before, but the timing covers are a little bit more difficult to get the gaskets out and replace those. So I could imagine someone maybe skipping out on that service, when really you should really consider doing it while you're in there. You know what? I'm not gonna believe it if this is true or not, but let me see if I can show you guys. And this is something that I suffered with on my 545i for so long. It took me so long to figure out what the issue was. I'll zoom in right there. That is the timing chain tensioner for this side of the motor. You can see it's got some oil on it, And I noticed that was a problem on mine. I remember changing out that gasket because I thought that's what the issue was. But if you look right above the timing chain tensioner right there, you'll see more oil. And that appears to be coming from the oil pressure switch, which is something that failed on my car. It started leaking oil into the connector. But even above that too, look, more oil. Looks like on, I think, the timing cover. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle what's right above there. I think it's the timing cover, possibly some bracket up there. Let's see if we can tell from up top. Yeah, see, look, that is the oil pressure switch again. You can see just the brown with the connector that goes on top of it. But then right above it, that is our vacuum canister, or our vacuum pump, sorry. So I would imagine both of these things could be leaking oil, and that would definitely cause a substantial leak on this side, because when the car gets running, obviously that oil pressure switch is under pressure. So even just the slightest leak is going to cause, well, a pretty big leak underneath the car like this, because like I said, it's under pressure. So I would say that is probably what we should look into changing. Along with the vacuum pump gasket, we should change that oil pressure switch. And then over on the other side of the motor, I'm thinking that, hey guys, it could definitely be the PCV, but also possibly that alternator bracket seal, which is a pain to replace. Now, one more thing I did want to mention too, sometimes I've seen these radiators start leaking fluid, because you imagine maybe you get a rock that goes through the fins of the grill here and it hits one of those radiator fins and causes a small leak. Now, usually you would see like water around one specific spot, or if you get the car up to temperature, you could sometimes see a little bit of coolant actually escaping and coming out as a stream from the radiator. So something to keep in mind, guys, is that keep your eyes open when you're inspecting for any sort of leaks, because they can be coming from multiple spots, from areas that you would never even think, like the radiator here. But usually you want to look at those common spots, like I said, vacuum pump, the oil pressure switch. Wow, that was something I almost forgot about. And then you got those coolant lines that we're all worried about, the upper radiator hose. So this thing is definitely going to need some service, but otherwise it seems to be running really good. Besides that squeak that was super annoying, it definitely runs smooth, no check engine lights as we saw. And the only other thing besides, you know, these leaks to worry about is going to be the airbag system, which I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that it's going to be something simple like a partially fried module or some fuse or something on the CAN bus line like one of you guys recommended. So we'll have to look into that, but for now I'm really more concerned with getting this motor running in tip-top shape. All right, so as you saw, I pulled the belt off right there so we can get a better idea of where that noise is coming from. So first I'm gonna go ahead and spin each individual pulley and see if we can recreate, you know, any sort of bad pulley noise.
Moments later.
Well, no, unfortunately, spinning these things does not make any noise. Both pulleys are good. Alternator is spinning real good. Actually, you can see it keeps spinning. So I'm either between the power steering pulley, which I think it could be because it's kind of a low sound, but let's go ahead and start the car up anyways, and just for a second, see if it makes any noise from the compressor. No noise there. Let's go ahead and put the belt back on and start it up and see if it makes that noise again.
Eventually.
Well, you just saw me using my stethoscope right there on the engine, and unfortunately it seems like that noise is coming from the block, and that's kind of got me concerned because it could be just a number of things. I'm hoping not internal. I don't think like a rod bearing would make that sort of noise, but it's just so weird that putting my stethoscope on the motor itself, like on the oil pan, is telling me that it's coming from the motor. So I did the same thing on the power steering pump and the water pump, the pulleys and everything. It doesn't seem like anything else is making that screeching noise. And if this was a manual transmission car, I would say it could be like the pilot bearing, because the pilot bearing would be between the engine and the bell housing of the transmission. And if that thing was bad, it could definitely be causing that squeak. But I don't think that these transmissions use a pilot bearing because they're an automatic. So I guess maybe we'll have to service the oil, do an oil change, check for any sort of glitter in the oil. Hopefully nothing serious there. But then at that point, I think I'd be pretty confused if it wasn't, you know, something engine related. So I'm not sure. But anyways, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the airbags by just checking the fuses in the fuse box up here. Just knock that out and just make sure there's no electrical funny problems in the fuse box. And that way we'll know it could be something CAN bus related, it could be the module related, but let's figure that out really quick. Well, no bad fuses. You know, it's funny, you guys say I get lucky finding these cars, but I'm not really feeling so lucky right now. So far, we are losing in terms of things that we're finding broken and things that we're finding mysterious, because this car is definitely gonna give us our money's worth trying to get things fixed here. So no bad fuses that could be causing any of our airbag or seatbelt issues. So likely could be a CAN bus error or a bad airbag module there causing the system to go down. It could be like one airbag on the airbag system that could be causing things on one side of the car to fail and kind of be short-circuited, although I really don't see that very often. I can't say I've seen it before, but man, this thing is gonna need some works, folks. I hope you guys are pumped to see this thing get down and dirty. All right, I think I figured it out. Look, there's a lot of vacuum pressure trying to hold this thing in right here. And then as soon as I seal it, but if I remove the cap when it's making that noise, and then it starts back up again. So this could easily be vacuum related. It could just be one of the seals that's interfering with the vacuum and causing that squeaking noise. So that's good. Actually, check that out. That's really cool. So we did discover a lot of things wrong with the E60 today, although I am glad that that noise wasn't anything serious at the end of the day. It's just a seal that is causing a squeaking noise because of a bad PCV valve, most likely. So we're gonna replace that one. It was leaking oil anyways, so we had to do that anyways. So I have a pretty good list in mind of things we wanna do, that PCV valve included, probably that coolant hose, the oil switch, as well as the vacuum pump gasket, because we don't want to have any oil leaking while we try to test drive it. We do have that airbag system issue that we haven't fully diagnosed yet, but I'm not so worried about that. I'd rather get the engine dialed and know if this car is worth putting a lot more money and time into first, because I think we're gonna probably have to end up doing that alternator bracket seal and maybe some other stuff, which I can't even foresee right now. But I hope you guys are enjoying watching, and hopefully you guys are learning something along the way, just like me. I learn something every time I work on these cars, and I think that's why I like working on them so much, is because it's so stimulating to me to learn new things and figure out how these systems work. So if you enjoy this sort of content, be sure to leave a like or a comment down below, especially if you have any recommendations on things that we should be doing, maybe things that I missed in the video that you guys saw. But be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new as well, because we have a lot of N62 content coming, as it turns out. And as always, I hope everyone has an awesome day, and we will see you in the next video.